in this country, the government gives you an option. We will come and tax your money to do what we have to do, or here's an alternative. We won't tax you, we'll borrow it. 10 years later, we'll give it all back to you, and we'll pay you interest in the meanwhile every year. Every rich corporation and every rich person knows which way to choose on that three-card Monte operation. This is a joke.
The right is getting angrier and angrier. And because of Trump's betrayal of them, the Epstein files is the tip of the iceberg. The reason why it's so important is because it woke up a lot of Trump voters like, oh, Trump might be lying too. Oh, Trump said he was against the establishment, but it might turn out it was just a more sophisticated trick, and he is the establishment. Until you get the money out of politics, all of our, like not all, but 95% of our politicians, maybe even 98%, are deeply corrupt.
Today, I'm talking to Professor Richard Wolff and Cenk Uygur. Richard Wolff is Professor of Economics Emeritus, University of Massachusetts Amherst. He is a visiting professor in the graduate program in International Affairs at the New School University. He's also the co-founder of Democracy at Work and host of their weekly national radio and TV show called Economic Update. Cenk Uygur is the founder and host of The Young Turks, a progressive news show which has over 27 million subscribers across social media platforms, with their content being viewed over 29 billion times. So Professor Wolff, if I can start with you. Recently, Trump passed his so-called Big Beautiful Bill, which increases the debt ceiling at least $2.4 trillion over the next 10 years. What's your thoughts on this particular bill, but also in general, what will happen to America if they just keep on borrowing?
Well, those are big questions. Let me try to unpack them a little bit with you. The United States is the largest debtor country in the world and has been for quite a while. Its debt is now exceeding its GDP, which is normally in the profession a bit of a sign that you better be careful about what you're doing with your deficit finance. Here in the United States, these two cautions no longer hold back a large portion of our political leadership in both parties, I might add. So that their behavior has been, and under Trump continues to be, we are not bound by any of these constraints, partly because so much of the world's debt is in the form of obligations in dollar terms, mostly by the U.S. Treasury. So we're free to do pretty much what we want. And so it's a politician's dream. They can give to their donor base the tax cuts that they want and that they pay for with their donations, and without a limit, apparently. That big, beautiful bill you referred to, its most important provision is ending the sunset clause that was attached to it back in 2017 when it was first passed. All those tax cuts then for corporations and the rich were set to expire on the last day of this year. And this big new bill takes away that expiration date. And so they can go on forever. And it adds a whole new collection on top of that. At the same time, it cannot raise taxes on the mass of people because that's politically no longer feasible, at least not in the short run. So they are stuck with having to continue to expand the debt. Hence your opening line here. We have a government cutting the taxes of corporations and the rich, dare not tax the masses, dare not cut programs as much as they might like, certainly not enough to prevent the debt from getting worse. So they do what most Republican governments do, make a big noise about fiscal responsibility, but never follow through. In fact, increase the debt, run the big deficits. They're bigger now than they've ever been in the last few years. So we're seeing quite conventional Republican activity, although dressed up as if it were a great new Trumpian alternative. It isn't. It's very old. If there's anything new, It's the gimmick, which isn't going to work and isn't working yet. It's a gimmick which is to maneuver so that you do limit the extra debt by getting the rest of the world to pay tariffs to get into the United States, and to give them some new revenue, tariff revenue, to supplement what they are unwilling to get from their own people in an income tax. And you know how the tariffs work. They're paid by American companies that import anything, and those companies will, once they have to pay that tax, do everything in their power, either to shift it to the mass of the American people, giving us an inflation, or squeeze the origin countries to lower their prices. Either way, it's Republicans lifting the tax burden off the corporations and the rich and spreading it to the mass of Americans or to foreigners. And this is called making America number one.
Cenk, I guess I'll pass to you the question as well. What do you think specifically of the Big Beautiful Bill, but also the same question, what will happen if America keeps on borrowing?
Yeah, I mean, here I agree with Professor Wolff 100%. There's no way of disputing the things that he said. Those are all facts, and that's exactly what we said on the Young Turks. But I'll layer on top of it. So the Republicans are monumentally full of crap. They never balanced the budget. The last Republican to leave office with a balanced budget was Dwight Eisenhower. Okay, so the Republicans have caused the great majority of the deficit and the debt. And last time Trump was in office, he put 8.4 trillion onto the debt, which is a monster number in 4 years. This time he's already put 4 trillion more onto the debt. So he's responsible for about 12.5 out of the 37 trillion in just 5 years. It's unbelievable. It's an unprecedented giveaway to the rich from a party that loves unprecedented giveaways to the rich and corporations. But nevertheless, he's broken every record there is. And now, but let's turn to the Democrats, right? So Democrats do have a leg to stand on here in some ways, in other ways, not at all, right? So to be fair, Clinton and Obama did reduce the deficit. From their first year to their last year, Clinton reduced it by 150%. He actually turned it into a surplus. That actually is possible in that case. And Obama reduced it by 50%. So pretty good record there. And leagues above, planets above the Republicans. So mainstream media, look, on almost every issue tells you the exact opposite of what's true. So they tell you that Republicans care about balanced budgets and the debt, when that's the exact opposite of the truth. They don't care about it at all. All they care about is tax cuts and corporate giveaways. On the other hand, now when you look at the discredit for the Democrats, so George W. Bush passed a massive tax cut for the rich. It was even bigger than the one that Trump passed in his first term. But they couldn't make it permanent. And who made it permanent? Barack Obama and Joe Biden, quietly, in the middle of the night. Obama sent Biden to negotiate with McConnell, and Biden gave away the store because they're on the same team. Biden was known as the senator from MBNA, that's a credit card company. His main calling card throughout his career has been serving the donors more effectively than any other Democrat. So he did a deal where the rich got to keep, the top 1% got to keep over 90% of the gains, okay? So, and since Obama and Biden did it, the press was silent about it. No big deal, didn't even happen, and that added trillions more to the debt, right? And all in service always of the rich and the donor class and corporations. So lastly, on the debt, we get to corporations. It was 35% rate when Trump came in. He brought it down to 21%. Biden says, I'm going to bring it up to 28%. Wait, it was at 35. What do you mean you're going to bring it back up to 28? And then Joe Manchin says, no way, 25. Biden goes, immediately, 25. It was at 35. Now we're talking about 25. Okay, good. Did you introduce a bill to get it to 25 even? No. Just lying about it. Never did anything about it at all, right? So both parties have added on to the debt for one specific reason, to pay back the people who bribed them. And the number one set of people that bribe them is corporations. So corporate donors come in. I mean, we have $17 billion in oil subsidies every year. Why? They're the most profitable companies in the world. and let alone the fact that they're creating climate change and putting all their costs on us. Why does Bob and Sally in Kansas have to take money out of their hard-earned paycheck to give to ExxonMobil as a gift? As a gift. That is insane. We can't negotiate drug prices. We're forced to pay for a genocide. All of this is utter corruption. So I don't see any daylight between me and Professor Wolff on this issue.
So I would ask you, so you've got all of this debt, so how do you lower it, like Professor Wolff said, politically? I was going to ask you, do you do something like Doge or anything like that? Or are you saying that really what you need to do is just get rid of Citizens United first?
Oh, 100%. It's not, look, guys, sometimes people that don't fully understand politics frustrate me because they're like, okay, let's get to money out of politics fourth. Well, then you're never going to get to it because you're never going to pass the first three bills. Everything is money in politics. There's only one issue. If you can't take money out of politics, they're always going to serve the people who bribe them. So today on the Young Turks, we're live at 6 o'clock Eastern. We're going to do a story about how AIPAC is the number one donor to 100% of Republican leadership in Congress, and they're the number one donor to 75% of Democratic leadership. They're the number one donor in this election cycle. Normally it's Big Pharma, but in this 2024 cycle, it was AIPAC, right? So you think, and then Israel says, hey, give me $500 million more in the middle of a genocide. The vote was 422-6, saying, yes, sir, of course, sir, we'd love to fund your genocide, sir. Bob and Sally are making too much money in Kansas. Let's take away some of their food. Let's take away some of their rent, right? And give it to Israel to commit a genocide. Give it to drug companies, give it to oil companies, etc. So until you get the money out of politics, all of our, not all, but 95% of our politicians, maybe even 98%, are deeply corrupt. Stop listening to mainstream media. They are not the best of us. They are the absolute worst of us. They're the people that out of 330 million people raised their hands and said, I will work for money. I'm holding an open auction. I'm basically a prostitute. You pay me money, I give you bills back. I rob the American people on your behalf. That is what 95% of politicians in this country do. You have to get the money out. If you don't have honest representatives, you're never going to win on any of these issues. So we should all focus all of our energy on that. By the way, there's a website, there's a group I formed, Wolfpack. They're fighting so hard for this. Please join them, fightcorruption.us, fightcorruption.us. So, but if you do get the money out, what happens? Well, we already know what happens for two reasons. Because it seems like we've lived in a world in the last 20, 30, 40 years where progress seems impossible. Serving the American people seems impossible. The rich and the powerful always win, right? That's because of money in politics. But there actually was a world between 1938 and 78 where we did not have Citizens United or Buckley or Bellotti. The Supreme Court had not legalized bribery yet. And in that 40 magical years, we created the greatest middle class the world has ever seen, the greatest economy the world has ever seen, and the American government, at least on the economic front, largely worked. It was amazing. The results were amazing. Okay, and then the second part is when you have uncorrupted politicians today, people who don't take corporate PAC money. So just Democrats don't take corporate PAC money, Ro Khanna, etc. Now my new PAC, Rebellion PAC, they don't take corporate PAC money. And lo and behold, even with Republicans, Josh Hawley and Matt Gaetz for like a minute, Tom Massey, now Republicans wind up being more hypocrites because Hawley wound up voting for that atrocious bill while complaining about it, so fraud in that case. But there are other bills where Hawley and Gaetz and the other guys not taking corporate PAC money, as bad as they are on other issues, we're like, yeah, wait, why are we taking from the middle class and giving to the rich? And they flip their positions. The Justice Democrats, again, if you're on the right or in the middle and you don't agree with some of the squad's goals, etc., no problem, guys. That's not about this. It's about honest politicians like Massey and Ro Khanna going, I don't work for corporations. I don't work for the donors. I work for you. And whenever they do that, even if you disagree on social issues or other policies, they're actually trying to pass bills that help the average American and not the donor class. It's the money, Lebowski. It's not complicated.
Professor, would you say that that's also the first thing that you need to focus on?
Well, it's certainly among the very, very important ones. Let me, in turn, layer a little bit on John. I agree with what he's said there, and it is worse than he says, and he says it's really bad. But I would only go a step further, and let me be my economic self for a minute. And let's go through just briefly what is going on here. The federal government, faced with all the issues it faces, could tax corporations and the rich. Let's be really clear, because one of the things that Junk correctly celebrates about that period back before 1978 was one of the remarkable things at that time was that the tax rate on corporate profits was much higher than it is today. And the tax rates at the higher income, individual income level, much higher than it is today. So it's not as though we have no evidence. It's not as though we have no experience. It's not as though taxing corporations and the rich is some terribly radical new idea. It's none of those. It's an old idea for which we have much evidence, and we could and we should be talking about it in this country. But it's worse than that. So here comes the economics. If you don't tax corporations and the rich, and if you can't offload that tax burden onto the mass of people because you've already been doing that for a century, then you end up borrowing the money. That's what a deficit means. The government spends and borrows what it refuses to tax from the corporations and the rich, whose taxes have been lowered. Well, now I want to remind everyone, ask yourself a simple question. Where does the government go to borrow the money that it must borrow because it doesn't tax corporations and the rich? And here's the answer to save you time. It goes right back to the same corporations and the same rich people, borrowing from them the money it did not tax from them. You understand? That's criminal hustle. Every rich corporation and every rich person in America who's even a little bit honest knows what I just said. They know that in this country, the government gives you an option. We will come and tax your money to do what we have to do, or here's an alternative. We won't tax you, we'll borrow it, 10 years later we'll give it all back to you, and we'll pay you interest in the meanwhile every year. Every rich corporation and every rich person knows which way to choose on that three-card Monte operation. This is a joke. We live, and Junk is good in articulating it, we live in a society where the only thing exceeding the grossness of its fiscal situation is the hypocrisy with which they cover it over as if it were something other than the straight-out robbery that it is.